Well, grace and peace to all of you. In the last video, we looked at how Paul is instructing the church at Ephesus to put off the old self. In the Gospels, we see the story of when Jesus raised Lazarus from the grave. He came out of the grave at the call of Jesus, but he still had grave clothes on that represented death. And in some ways, that's what my responsibility as a shepherd is helping you take off all of the remnants of the death cloth that the flesh produced through the old man that was crucified. And now you've risen again. He says, now let's get those death clothes off, and in replacing it, let's put on the new self. So just let's look at verse 24. He says, and to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. Therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil. So he kind of sums it up pretty quickly. He says, put on the new self. There's a difference between the believer and the unbeliever. The true believer has received the life of Christ to be the source. Unbeliever can do some outer improvements and changes, but the inner problem will always remain the same. And so God doesn't deal first with the outside problems. He deals with the inward problems. He changes the heart. He gives us a new heart, a new nature, and with that, a whole new way to live, to love, and to serve others. He says, well, put it on. Renew the depths of what it is to be in a relationship with Jesus Christ. When we believe in Jesus Christ, the assumption is we know that he is the Lord of our lives, that we were redeemed, which means to be bought with a price, that we no longer belong to ourselves to do as we please. We have been renewed in the Spirit, and we need to keep reminding ourselves of what is true. You can't put on the new man until you put the old man off. So it's a following of a new birth, a new life, a new source of living. He said, created after the likeness of God. So, how do we put on this new self that looks like God? The life of Christ in you, when it's allowed to live through you, is going to look like Jesus. He urges us and enables us to love, to understand, to be patient, to forgive, to accept the difficult people in our lives, to endure difficult situations and even times of persecution and suffering. He tells us that we need to gently correct and be faithful at all times. The new self is real. It's genuine. It's love unfeigned. It's not something we just put a smile on as we go into church. It's righteous, it's true, it's holy, it's all of these things, because all of those things are Christ. And where does Christ live? He lives in each and every one of you who have been born again as the children of God. He says, in true righteousness and holiness. There is a true righteousness, which is the gift that we receive from God. When he takes our sin and becomes sin for us, he makes us righteous. there is also a self-righteousness, which is based on the actions that we have taken, religious actions for self-improvement. One looks like Jesus. True righteousness looks like Jesus. And self-righteousness looks like a Pharisee. It's all about what they do and what they don't do and how well they follow the rules. True righteousness points us right back to Christ. It's not what we've done, it's what he's done. And I think that's a good way of thinking about it. He's the one who changes us. It's not our change. It's the opposite of religion. Religion is focused on the outward. Jesus focuses on the inward and then transforms the outward expression. And so it expresses itself, this true righteousness, in holiness. Sometimes we get afraid of this word holiness because we think, how could we ever be holy? Holiness isn't some pious, self-righteous person. Holiness is not even a person who's focused on their own behavior. Holiness is the result of our being in him and belonging to him. When you think of holiness, think of wholeness. Those who have been forgiven and accepted. We become holy when God takes us into himself and we belong to him. Remember, even in the old covenant, that when an offering was brought to the priest and the priest placed the offering on the altar, it instantly became holy because it belonged to God. Do you belong to God? Then you're holy. He says, now let that holiness and that true righteousness be expressed through you. Holiness makes you whole. It makes you complete. It makes you accepted. It is everything that we all need and hunger for, only to be found by Christ. He says, therefore, having put away falsehood, he says, now that you've come away from all the falsehood, all the lies, all the deceptions of the enemy, tell the truth. Why do people lie? I think people lie to protect themselves or to protect others, or they just get caught up in the ways of the world system, and lying is a way to get ahead. But Paul says, having put away, it's something you have done. It's not something you're going to do. He says, having put away. You know, we have this funny way of saying, not calling a lie a lie. I just was watching some politicians. I was like, wow, it's so easy for them to lie, and they don't even blush. But they don't call it a lie. They call it a shading the truth, an exaggeration, a fib, a misspeak. That's my favorite one. And we have all kinds of euphemisms for this common human activity. But even a euphemism is ultimately a lie, an attempt to mask an ugly truth. He says, that's not who you are anymore. You have put away falsehood. Now let each of you speak the truth with his neighbor. Speak truth. Remember, truth isn't just a what. Truth is a who. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He says, so speak Jesus to your neighbor. Speak the truth, even if it hurts. People of him are in the truth. And so their lives are going to begin to look more and more like Jesus. They're going to attract the same kind of people that Jesus attracted. And they're going to offend the same kind of people that were offended by Jesus. He says, why do we forsake falsehood? Why do we embrace truth and speak truth to our neighbors? Because we are members of one another. The church fundamentally is not a bunch of individuals doing their own thing. The church fundamentally is a body, and each one of us is an interdependent part, and we need each other. So why would we speak truth? Because we need each other to be healthy. We need people to love us enough to tell us what is right. We can't do it alone. We need people to remind us of what is true, what fits us, what suits us as new believers. Then he says something interesting. He says, be angry and do not sin. Be angry? It's not a misprint. He says, be angry. And I started thinking about, well, there were times when Jesus was angry. He went into the temple area and he cleared it out in anger, a righteous anger, because they had made it a marketplace. It was supposed to be a house of prayer. It had become a place of corruption, and he scattered it out. The religious leaders were often subject to the anger of Jesus because of the way they manipulated the people, the burdens that they put on them. They had distorted the very image of God. And so we should ask ourselves, are we angry about the same things that Jesus is angry about? Or do we just have an ambivalent attitude about it? Shouldn't we not, as believers, be angry that in our country it's still quite acceptable to kill the unborn? Should we not be angry at the corruption? I think we should. But we should do it all at the same time and not sin. You see, what makes it sin when it becomes all about us? When it's us feeling offended, when it's us having our feelings hurt, when it's about our selfishness and not getting our own way. All that kind of anger is sinful because it's about us and we're the center point. Righteous anger has its center point in the great Almighty, the God of the universe. And so let's remember, it always turns back to him. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. If you find yourself in a situation where you're angry, what does he say? Don't let it stay there. Don't let the sun go down on it. Resolve it quickly. Resolve it quickly. He goes, and give no opportunity to the devil. So what happens when we get angry? We stew on it. We justify it. We rationalize how everyone else is wrong-headed. And we give an opportunity to the devil to work in us and to allow a root of bitterness to dig deep into our hearts where we're no longer forgiving. Hebrews 12:15 says, see to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. You can see someone who's been so angry for so long that they defile themselves. Not just physically, they defile themselves in the soul. And it's a very sad thing. That's why Romans 12:21 says, do not become overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Is there evil in the world? Absolutely. And we can be angry at the evil that we see, but we can't allow it to become a root of bitterness, which defiles us and those around us. We set out to be vessels in which Christ who lives in us can live through us, and in which way we can overcome evil with good. You see, that's always the answer. The conclusion is always Christ. You never overcome evil with more evil. We, friends, we overcome evil with good. What's the answer? Well, we put on Christ. Who is he in this world? He's a wonderful Savior. And it's just simply releasing the divine life through us into a hurting world. Grace and peace. Once again, we always need it, and it's always Christ. Have a wonderful day.